welcome everyone to the Applied Information Show. Today we've got a very exciting session for you today. We're going to be talking about connected vehicles, but really the applications that are used in the real world. My name's Peter Ashley. I'm going to be your host today, and I'm joined by Bryan Mulligan, who's the President and CEO of Applied Information. Just a little bit about what we're going to learn today. So we're going to go in and look at a couple of real-world use cases for connected vehicles. We're going to look at cellular, DSRC, C-V2X applications and how they're really used in the field. And then we're going to learn about some other interesting technologies like over-the-air software updates, and also touch on a little bit about the spectrum in terms of what's been happening there. And then lastly, we're going to go and talk about, well, where do we think the future of connected vehicles is going to be? So Bryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Pete.
And one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you this time was, who is Bryan Mulligan?
Well, that's I could use the whole show answering that question, but I've been a serial entrepreneur all these years. And in the process of trying to make a difference in the world, I'm actually originally a civil engineer. So concrete and asphalt and bridges and so forth is my original training. But as I got more and more involved in the technology side as a young man, realized that this is where we could actually make a difference, build businesses, but not build businesses just with the idea of making a profit, but build businesses with leaving a legacy and making a difference. And that's led me over all these years to here in Atlanta to the Applied Information. And the interesting thing about being an engineer is, the story about an engineer goes something like this, that especially a civil engineer, anybody can build a bridge. What you want to do is hire an engineer because he'll build a bridge that barely stands up.
Now, what do you mean by that?
That's actually an important thing to consider, because we deal in a society that tolerates risk. We'll talk about safety and things like that. And a lot of people say, oh, well, safety comes first. But we know as engineers that safety comes third. What you have to do is you have to build systems that are affordable and deliver societal benefit. And as I say, it could be a separate show on itself, for the risks that society takes in engineering. And occasionally we have a bridge collapse, and occasionally we have a building collapse. It doesn't happen very often. And what it does is we assure that what we do makes a difference to society. We're going to talk a lot more about that in connected vehicles, because there have been a fair number of practitioners, the scientists as I call them, who say, well, let's not deploy connected vehicles until we can be assured that they're perfect. Well, that's like the guy, the difference between a scientist and an engineer, which when they've got a choice of watches, and one watch keeps approximate time. The engineer says, I'll take that one. The scientist says, I'll take the one that's broken because it's 100% right twice a day. So you guys can think about that one a little bit. But nonetheless, that sets the stage for the engineering approach to connected vehicles, and which is what we do, is focused on applications, focused on making a difference, first focused on saving lives. And what that'll do is it'll lead us to a future where there's societal benefit, as opposed to standing on the sidelines haranguing each other about whose fault it is.
So talk us through a little bit about, where are we in the landscape right now for connected vehicles?
We're at something of a tipping point. And again, each of these are in-depth subjects that can deserve treatment on their own. But why I say that we're at a tipping point is that the concept of connected vehicles has been around for 20 years or more. And we haven't successfully deployed it that technology. But at the same time, our generation has deployed the internet, we deployed cell phones, we deployed electric vehicles, we're making great roads into autonomous vehicles, and all sorts of safety applications, for example, forward collision detection with radars and so forth, have now come about and been deployed in mainstream, all in this time that we've talked about deploying connected vehicles. So it's really important that we're at this tipping point to get on with deployment and deploy what we know works and deliver value today. Because if we keep on waiting for some perfect scenario to arise, we're just going to be overtaken by technology, and people are developing new ways of doing things, and so the window is now to deploy widely.
So how do we go about actually deploying that widely?
That's a $64,000 or billion-dollar question. And the answer is you need to demonstrate value. I think we've shown in the connected vehicle world that deploying connected vehicle by government edict is not going to work. There was just too much pushback, too much sense that government mandating a particular technology was probably not the best solution. So what we have to do is, like cell phones and the internet, we'll start off with an imperfect world, but delivering great value. And the cell phones are a great model where the first AM cell phones, you could crack them and hijack them and listen to conversations, and there were some very embarrassing British royal family conversations that were eavesdropped. And then security improved, and we solved all these problems. So I'm not saying that's directly applicable to connected vehicles, but the concept certainly is. We have to go with the spectrum and the radios that we have, not the spectrum and the radios that we wish we had. And then as we talk later in the show about over-the-air software updates, over-the-air security updates, and so forth, we've actually solved the primary problems about how to deliver applications on platforms that are imperfect on day one.
So you mentioned we've got to deploy technology and applications that are beneficial to society today.
Correct.
What are some of those applications?
There's some low-hanging fruit, and some people will listen into this and say, yeah, but we're just giving a plug for the technologies that we sell. Well, actually, no. I'm going to challenge folks who think like that. We develop the technologies that customers need. We're not waiting for some massive payout from the government or something like that. We're going around listening to customers, seeing what their needs are, and delivering product and selling it to them. And so the connected vehicle application that is demonstratively saving lives and improving the lives of citizens is getting paramedics through the traffic intersections, a V2I application where the lights are turned green and everybody, for the paramedics, and everybody else is brought safely to a halt. Again and again, there's all sorts of testimonials. In fact, we received a delightful email, unsolicited email from a fire chief in Baton Rouge, just saying what a difference it makes to their world, that their fire truck can respond to calls safely. We're saving the lives of the paramedics, and we're also saving the lives of the public. And one of our cities here in the North Atlanta area, since deploying this connected vehicle technology, reports 0 collisions between their fire apparatus and members of the public since they deployed connected vehicles. So that's an example of one.
Yeah, so what I think we're going to do is we're going to jump into a little video over here that's going to show here in Alpharetta what they've been doing. And please, everyone, watch the video, but also feel free to ask any questions during this. We are watching your questions straight in front of me, so I'm going to be able to answer the questions straight away, and let's keep it interactive. So go ahead and hit out the questions, and while you're watching the video, remember to hit the like button on Applied Information's channel.
I'm Scott McCullers. I'm the Fire Operations Chief for the City of Alpharetta. The traffic preemption system here in Alpharetta is installed on all of our traffic lights here locally. We have a transmitter on our apparatus which allows us to basically get a green light as we're responding on incidents throughout the city. The preemption system changes the light directly in front of them, but it also starts staging the other lights ahead of them so that traffic flows better. We've had the system online for about 6 months now, and during that 6 months period, we have realized about an 18% drop in our response times during that time frame. When you're gaining 10 to 12 seconds per traffic light on average, it really has an impact on the response time. We've transitioned from an older system that was infrared or line of sight to a newer system that's GPS based, and it seems to be working great.
So I mean that video really tells a story in terms of connected vehicle applications really providing value in day one.
Correct. And so, and then I just push back hard against the people who say, yes, but what radios does it use? Because only if you have my favorite type of radio, GSRC, cellular, VDX, whatever, Wi-Fi, does matter. And as it happens, we use 4 different radios in different applications. So the details of the radios are less important than the fact that we can get these deployments done, demonstrate the value, get adoption, and again, now what's the next stage is you build on these things in layers. So all these fire trucks running around turning the light screen, yes, but they also can communicate with the cars. So that when you're standing at the light and you go, whoa, 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 there's a fire vehicle approaching, and you don't know where it's coming from, the speakers in your car say it's approaching from the left or the right or behind or in front, and guiding you how to get out of the way. All of these things are built in layers, and just like the cell phone industry, and just like the internet, and just like YouTube, and just like this live stream that we're using today, it wasn't built by some great designer designing something. It was built through a series of small imperfect standards and then deploying applications that people found value in. And before you know it, you've got billions of people using these applications.
So what you're saying is start off by looking at small wins that you can get out of a connected vehicle system and build on top of it. You don't need to deploy something that has 100 different applications on day one.
That is correct. It's the old story of, before you say anything, imagine what it would be if it was printed on the front page of the newspaper the following day, and that sort of can guide one's public utterances. So likewise with connected vehicles. It's not what your other engineers think. It's not what your clients or the various levels of government think. It's what you can actually put on the front page of the newspaper. The city of saves lives by doing, and that's what's driven us. For those of you who follow Applied Information and our public profile, we champion that, and it's not because we're into the business of self-promotion, although that's part of business. The reason is, what's critical is not what we think about what we did. It's not critical even what another engineer thinks about what we did. It's critical what the public think about what we're doing. And as we talk about school buses and school zone and other applications of connected vehicles, it's quite interesting that we've had and with automakers and things like that, we've had some great experiences involving folks who who actually have never heard about connected vehicles. They don't know about the radio wars. They don't know about the FCC's thing. And there's some great stories that have come about how using connected vehicles just make the lives of children and school bus drivers and school administrators better by using connected vehicles to deliver applications to those folks without them even knowing how it works.
It's a fantastic segue there into, you talked about Audi and school safety. And there was a recent event, and I think what we should do is let's play that video of that event, and then everybody can, see what we're talking about. And go ahead, ask questions, everyone.
Yeah, so we play the video, and then what I'll do is I'll tell you some behind-the-scenes kind of things about what actually happened and anecdotes about how it all worked.
We're so glad you've joined us today for the School Bus Safety Connected Vehicle Press Conference live from the iATL.
It's fantastic to be in front of you announcing this really important collaboration between public sector and private sector to deliver technology applications that'll save the lives of children.
Safety in the buses that we build is really part of our DNA. Over the years, loading zone safety has been a real key part, and it's something that we are continuously working on.
The most dangerous part of their daily trip is not the ride, it's getting on the bus in the morning and getting off the bus in the afternoon.
We knew that connected vehicles and technology could help solve this problem. And so what we wanted to do is warn the drivers in the event of them speeding in a school zone. Because if you slow everybody down, then fewer crashes occur, and the crashes that do occur are less severe.
In our industry of transportation and ITS, you hear a lot of acronyms. And one thing you always hear is BSM's, basic safety messages. We look at the messages that we're going to see today more than basic. These are critical safety messages.
This was a vision a number of years ago when we envisioned that this could happen with cellular technologies.
This technology to be able to keep people from running stop-arm violations, it's huge. I mean, the possibilities that this has.
As we come around the corner now, you're going to see an active message come up.
We've always been innovative and we've always put safety first, but this is taking us to a whole new level, and we're just thrilled to be a part of this partnership, and we hope we'll set the pace for other districts across the country.
It's great to tell this story, to show other communities around the country how the efforts here in Fulton County and Alpharetta can really inspire them to take steps for this safety technology too.
Bluebird has been doing this for almost 100 years, and safety is our #1 concern. This is something we can definitely get behind. Just been a remarkable experience.
Any way we can leverage innovation and technology to make our community safer is a win-win for all of us.
Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to a bright future.
Now, what was really interesting there, Brian, was actually that last slide that I found super interesting, which is the collaboration of multiple different companies and government sector working together. And maybe you want to just talk us through how that happened.
It came about through a desire by a number of parties to effect change. Change is easy to talk about, it's hard to implement, because one of the things that everybody wants to do is do what we did last year. And so what we ended up with is, and again, this is how collaboration, particularly technology collaboration, happens. It's much more to do with the who than the what and the how. And so what we ended up is with a coalition of the willing, and that started off with Audi, who we'd met through the 5GAA, the 5G Automotive Association, and started talking about applications. And through those conversations, Audi realized, well, in fact, the whole school safety thing is separate from intersections that everybody's been beating to death. Let's look at school safety. We stood up the iATL, which is where I'm sitting right now. as a collaborative space, and then ended up with this collaboration project with Audi. On the strength of the collaboration project with Audi, that's how Bluebird, the bus company, joined. And that's one of Bluebird's biggest customers is the Fulton County school system. And that's how they joined. And before we knew it, we had like-minded people focused on delivering applications and not focused on turf war or radio wars or whatever, just focused on, well, let's see whether this works. And what we did is we established that the goal was these functional outcomes-based contracting, where the Audi would respond to the school bus in a particular way, and it would respond to the school zone in a particular way. And it was really interesting with connected vehicles is once you got your mind out of the technology business into the application business, what happened is we got the radios working real quick. Then we got the school bus working real quick, and we got the school zones working really quickly. And so the radio complexity was actually quite manageable. Then we talked about messages, and so we had the messages in a series of small imperfect standards, and NEMA TS10 is a standardized set of messages, and we used some of those messages, and we realized, oh my word, there are a couple of messages missing. We identified a standards gap by focusing on applications, not by sitting in some back room, by actually driving on the street. Great support from the city of Alpharetta and the North Fulton Community Improvement District who support us by making the roadways available and participating enthusiastically with us. And then the discussion, it was so interesting to experience our engineers and Audi engineers. And Audi engineers, actually, as it happens, did all this technology development from California. And so what they did, this was all done in the middle of COVID, keep everybody safe, and they did over there software updates, and they did drives and videos and live streams and so forth. And it was tailoring the user interface to say, what should it tell the driver? Now, that's obviously Audi's business, that they're a car manufacturer. And so they ended up with a two-stage alerting process when the school bus had the stop arm out. As you're approaching it, it says there's a school bus ahead, ding, kind of turn. And then if it calculates that it's going to overtake the school bus, while the school bus has got its stop arm out, so based on the speed and the position of the vehicle, then it comes with the louder barp and a stop message. And that was just wonderful to see that all the talk about the complexity of what was under the hood went away, and we focused on the applications of delivering value to the drivers.
So how does, having these automakers come into the industry change the market demand?
It's huge and a much bigger, more difficult problem than it looks. We're a surface infrastructure technology company, so we don't make cars or have any involvement. We're not trying to sell to the automakers. But we're very sympathetic to their challenges, which is that cars, by the way that they're designed and built, have a very long lead time in the design process. Very difficult. There's nothing much static. Two, the legacy automakers are getting to grips with technology and electric vehicles and the hundreds of microprocessors that are in a modern automobile. And it's just a challenge for them to respond quickly. What they battle internally with is, what are the use cases? And everybody, all these engineers go into a room and talk about use cases and write them down as if they're some kind of theoretical thing. We say, no, let's not call them use cases. These are applications. And what we need to do is get them out in the street and get them into the consumer's hands, like the school system and so forth. And what those guys think is much more important. And what happens then is that, we've got a number of future projects with Audi to extend this model to do new things. We'll be announcing these in due course, but to do new things to show connected vehicles working in a way that the public will understand. And that's what that video was done for, is this collaboration. But everybody can understand we want to keep the children safe. And the data shows that that thousands of children are injured and hundreds killed at walking to the school bus and so forth. The safest time for the child on his journey to school is actually while he's on the bus. His, he or her, sorry.
So I wanted to change gears here a little bit. You know, we spoke about the emergency vehicles and some of those applications in terms of you know, where the emergency vehicle is coming from. And there's a whole slew of different applications that we haven't really looked at. What I'd like to do is just show a short video that gives you a bit of an overview. It's not all of the applications, but it's some of the day one applications that cities can really look at.
Meet Travel Safely, an app that helps you get where you're going safely. Travel Safely works if you're driving, walking, biking, wheeling, scooting, or skating. Get real-time audio notifications. Red light. So you can focus on your surroundings. Get notified when you're approaching a red light or when it's time to get ready for green. Get ready for green. Travel Safely works with local emergency vehicles, helping them respond to calls faster. Get notified when an emergency vehicle is approaching. Emergency vehicle front. Or when to share the road with your two-wheeled friend. Cyclist. Vehicle approaching cyclist. Travel Safely tells you when you're passing a school or work zone, and if you need to slow it down. So whether you're on the road or just crossing, pedestrian. Every time you open Travel Safely, you're helping make a better commuting experience for all of us. Together. Download the Travel Safely app today and join our community of users committed to making our roads safer.
So you see all those different applications that are out there, but you know, I also saw quite a lot that was focused on pedestrians and cyclists, what in our industry we call the vulnerable road user. Why is having a smartphone application actually important?
It's critically important, and not for the reason that most people think. And I'm not going to relitigate the radio wars of it should be this radio or that radio. My cell phone over here, my little visual prop, has got, I think, 8 radios in it. And we've gone from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and so forth. And these radios, that very smart guys who do all of this, figure out how to use the right radio for the challenge. And so what we did with Travel Safely, and the real focus of Travel Safely, was going to deliver applications with the radios that we had. And those were the radios that were in a smartphone. And the purists will say, oh, yes, but latency, what about latency? Well, as it happens, latency is not an issue because the radios work so quickly these days that the cell phone gives you 300 milliseconds latency on a round trip through the network, which is plenty good enough for most applications. And the applications that need quicker latency have largely been superseded by other technologies like front-facing radar and vision systems and so forth. But some people say, oh, so you're actually selling against direct radios? Absolutely not. They've all got their part to play. And the interesting thing with our collaboration with Audi and Bluebird and these guys is because we're using direct peer-to-peer radios without a broker in the middle, without going through a cloud element. It was actually much simpler because we transmitted a message, they received it, they transmitted a message, we received it. High five. It was literally that complicated to make it work. And it was actually eye-opening for me. I've been in this business a long time. That a key advantage of the peer-to-peer radios DSRC, Cellular V2X, PC5, these radios, is they're much simpler to deal with on an organization to organization basis. Yes, they're 10 times a second and they're low latency and they're this and they're that and they're secure and all the other things. But for us, the eye-opening thing for me in this collaboration with Audi was the simplicity and how easily we made it go, how easily we made it all work.
So that's a great point. So in other words, you don't, I mean, the cost of a radio, and I should have grabbed the little props, but I mean, they're all small little chipsets that go into equipment. The cost of a radio is really cheap. Don't worry about the radio technology. Look at the applications, because there are going to be certain applications that you don't need direct line of sight radio, or vice versa, or whatever it is, but just put them all in.
Now, you can do that on the infrastructure side. You can't really do that on the automobile side, because the car companies are much, much more cost conscious. It's just not, and not only do the radios cost, but you have to have the antenna and so forth. There's a lot of real estate in a vehicle to use multiple radios. So that's essentially why Cellular V2X with its network radio and its direct radio has won out. Because these are all backwards compatible based on the LTE waveform. And so what you're ending up is a platform where you can upgrade radios in the future to have new benefits and high bandwidths and lower latencies and do all sorts of things. But it's not going to make the previous radios obsolete, point number one. And point number two, you're not trying to pick a radio that you're going to declare to have a 20-year life. We just know from the radios we know sooner get 4G LTE standards under our belt and 5G is coming out and the 60G standards are being written. So we're dealing with an environment of continual change, and what you have to do is, I mean, the key thing that made the internet so successful was the concept of abstraction. You've got everything built in layers. Abstraction is that the messages and the applications are built on messages, and the messages are built on communications, and the communications are built on a physical layer, and so forth. And the same applies with this. It's not turning a switch and you can just suddenly deploy it. You're going to have various radios of various things, and what we love about the module makers who make cellular V2X radios that we use, and DSRC radios, obviously the FCC's moved to cellular V2X, is that they're largely software-driven radios where you can actually, with over-the-air software update the radios themselves and how they negotiate and so forth. And that's the big reason why we know that there won't be a security problem, is that you can update the security over the air. You don't have this brittle environment where if you get something wrong, you've got thousands and thousands of cars that are not secure, let's say. I mean, it's
and that's where CV2X, having the CV2X Direct and the CV2X network, really allows you to do those updates and ensure everything's secure.
That is correct. Security can be another whole show by itself. I'm going to tell a story against myself because shows why I should never trust anything I say. Is that I was convinced, because don't forget, the internet was created in my generation. I was convinced there's one thing we would never do, and that was do banking on the internet. Clearly, that's an idiotic thing that nobody would ever do. Well, some very clever people came up with some very clever schemes, public key encryption and so forth, to create security paradigms where we all do banking on the internet. And so what that does is that the standards change from time to time, and then Microsoft will obsolete a set of certificates because they're no longer secure and go to SHA 256 or whatever the latest certificate is. So security is in a continual state of change. And one of the things that we know is that the experts in each of these fields that we have to depend on. And what you're not going to be able to do is impose this requirement on your local city and say, all right, Alpharetta won't mind me picking on them. Pete, you got to figure this out. It's not going to happen. He's got to rely on the private sector and the practitioners in the private sector to develop the technologies, to operate the technologies, operate the security, and share these experiences through standards so that everybody can learn from the experiences of all, and will deliver a safe connected vehicle system, not dissimilar to the way we've delivered an internet that we all do banking on.
So when we go out and we've deployed connected vehicle, emergency vehicles, getting green lights, and you saw some of the travel safety things there. How do we go from there to a city saying, you know what we would really like to do is we would like to give bicycles green lights? Or how do they go through that process? Because there's a constant change in this industry in terms of new features, new applications that people want to achieve. How do you do that?
You do it through a two-stage process. The first one is the business process of what we call socializing the technology. It's an expression that I stole from Fede Massimo down at the City of Atlanta. Socializing the technology. Hugely important, and that's what was hugely important about the collaboration with Audi and Bluebird, is we got and I'm going to tell a story in a little bit about the magic school bus, which is quite a sweet story, but to illustrate how this process actually works. So what you do is you socialize the technology that when everything is connected to everything, it changes everything. And so in fact we had a customer who said, well, I've got my school children who actually, I'm a bicycle friendly community, and what I want is to make it safer for the school children to ride their bicycles to school by bringing, if there's a peloton or if there's a group of cyclists, I want them to actually get priority and bring all the traffic to a halt and give them green lights. And I think you've actually got a little bit of a video showing when we did the acceptance testing here, how that actually all works. We didn't use children, we used adults in cycling gear, but it gives you an idea of when everything's connected to everything, it changes everything. And what we did with an app on people's phones, that you can tell where the cyclists were, you could tell how many were in a group, you could change the lights and make it safer for them to cycle.
At Applied Information, we developed the latest in traffic control technology, helping first responders get to you faster and making communities safer on the roads. Now, we're bringing the same technology to cyclists with green light priority in communities where our traffic cabinets are installed. Like our emergency vehicle preemption technology, Pelotons can catch a green wave when the group has the Travel Safely app turned on during their ride. When using the Travel Safely app, cyclists are detected just like a car and also receive green light priority when riding in a group. No matter how short or long your ride is, we want you to be seen, meaning less accidents and a safer ride. Take a break from watching out for the world and let the world watch out for you. Contact your city to request Travel Safely and bicycle priority.
So, let's say we've got another city. What is the process to actually go and create new applications? You talk about trying to look at the safety aspect of it, or how, because we've seen when we first started connected vehicles, there were 5 or 6 applications. Now they're 30-something applications.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is deal with this from a business point of view, not a technical point of view. Because the technology is actually straightforward. You saw there was a phone and our standard device in the cabinets. New application over there, software updates. Oh, look, there it all worked exactly as advertised. The key thing, which we do very badly in transportation, and me as an engineer, Exhibit A, I don't listen very well. I talk a lot. And one of the things we don't do is really listen to the end users very well as a manufacturer. And what we've done is worked with distributors and systems integrators and so forth. And we've got a nationwide network of distributors who are hugely powerful in this world of understanding what their customers' needs. So, for example, that cyclist peloton idea was been adopted by a couple of cities in California and is being installed and commissioned as we speak. But in other parts, that just didn't play politically. The mayor doesn't like the cycling club. Those guys are just so demanding, and they're not interested in anything except us building them cycle lanes. Then you get some inner city folks who've got a lot of commuting cycling problems who are interested in the technology. They say, yeah, but I don't like that video, all these rich people in spandex racing bikes. That's not what we are. So what you've got to do is listen, and socialize the technology. And if it's right, I'll segue into my Magic School Bus.
Before you jump into the Magic School Bus, you mentioned something over there, which was, you mentioned it very briefly, which was OTA. Can you explain what OTA is and why it's important?
It's a paradigm shift in technology thinking to have OTA stands for over the air. So it's over the air software update is what it, and it's just abbreviated to OTA in these acronyms that we all use. The key thing that it does is that whole V diagram, which engineers love. Define the requirement, then go through breaking it down into detailed design, and then test it, and then and build your project. Takes years, and it's fine for building a bridge, but it doesn't work very well for technology. And the reason being is the key part of a technology deployment is to solve problems that you haven't thought of yet. And that's a key thing where over there software update comes in. Yes, you've got these platforms like your phones, like your router, like your Nest in your thermostat, all can solve problems that you haven't thought of yet. They can also solve security problems that you haven't thought of yet. So that's a key part of the identifying the requirement. Can your system solve problems that you haven't thought of? And so I challenge all the consultants who are listening in, and concept of operations and detailed design of all of that. A key part of that is, does your technology deployment, first of all, focus on outcomes? Because the radios and the other technologies are changing so fast, you're just not going to be able to keep up. Does your technology deployment focus on outcomes-based contract? And two, can it solve problems that I haven't thought of yet? Because these problems and these opportunities and these applications are just coming about the whole time.
And that actually segues quite nicely into your Magic School Bus thing, because that was something that wasn't thought of originally.
Absolutely correct. So what happened is that we did this collaboration with the RD, and this was in the last couple of weeks before school broke for the summer this year. So this is all current information. So that allowed us to have a relationship with the school bus operators. And so we just talking to them about their challenges and safety challenges and so forth. Really great group of folks, and Trey was hugely collaborative in this process. And they described the problem of traffic lights for school buses. And it's not the delay, it's the safety. Because what happens is when the school bus stops at a traffic light, the naughty kids stand up and run around the bus. They don't run around the bus while it's going, they run around the bus when it's stopped. When the bus pulls off, that creates a dangerous situation. So we said to them, well, how about this? What we'll do is we'll use the same radios that we're talking to the Audi to talk to the intersections, and what we'll do is turn the lights green on a priority basis for the school buses. So the same radio technology delivered a new application that nobody had thought of. The radios were installed.
And you used over-the-air software update to update it.
Yep, over-the-air software to update the software in the school bus, and in the intersection loaded new plans to interact with the traffic controllers, and said, okay, well, we've got a couple of weeks. We'll turn a bus loose here in North Fulton, out of Atlanta, and see what the perception is. Well, we did some interviews and so forth, and it was absolutely spectacular. And we're going to continue this when school starts up in the fall on a wider scale to validate these things. But the bus driver just really such a great partner and collaborator, has in his charge every day, twice a day, all these children. And he said, he kept it quiet, but the word quickly went round through the kids, through the parents, to the other bus drivers, that he had a magic school bus because it never stopped. And so he was pretty proud of that, and off he goes, and he drives his bus around, reporting how much less stressful it is, how to keep his schedule. He doesn't have to drive at the speed limit. He can drive slower and more steadily, and consequently more safely, because he didn't stop for the red lights. A key thing that we did as part of this test is, did any members of the public complain? And the answer is, hell no. Nobody even noticed that this magic school bus just got green lights as it went along its way. Now what happened is that the other bus drivers got wind of this. And so he describes that when he left the school, there was a line of buses waiting at the entrance of the school to fall in behind him because they knew that if they followed the magic school bus, that they would also get green lights. And that's just such a great story of, they didn't understand the radios, they didn't understand the radio wars, they didn't understand, they didn't need to. They just knew that they had a magic school bus that did magic things to make life better for the driver and for the children. And we're particularly proud of that as a little story, and that'll be rolling out in the fall.
And what I think is great about that is it took away the discussion from in terms of getting green lights or whatever it is. We collaborated with the people, we spoke to them, we educated the bus driver so that he knew what was going on, that he wasn't surprised by it or anything like that. And I think that open communications between multiple different departments is absolutely critical in this deployment.
And the collaboration was such that training is a big part of it, but it's not technology training, it's applications training. And so, Mr. School Bus Driver, you don't have to do anything. When your bus goes, it just gets green lights. That's your expectation. Tell us if it doesn't. All the rest was him learning, worked as advertised, and then seeing the effect on the kids, seeing the effect on his speed, seeing the effect on his sense of safety, was all intuitive. And that was just a great example of the deployment of connected vehicles, where it wasn't a big technological focus, it was a big application focus, and the test was, did it make things better for the bus driver, the school children, and we still got no public complaints. And those were the tests, those were outcomes that we established at the beginning of the test, and were very successfully achieved.
Yeah, and Joe, just to answer your question there, it's using the same technology that goes into emergency vehicles, that goes into school buses, with a device on the vehicle that's requesting the green lights.
But to answer Joe a bit more technically, yes, it does. So in other words, what you do is you establish a priority, and the emergency vehicles have a higher priority than the school bus. So if there's an emergency vehicle, it'll get the green, and the school bus will get the red.
Yeah. I'd like to switch gears just a little bit, Brian, which is really important for agencies, which is, you go and deploy all this technology. how do you maintain the technology? Because you can put in all these cool things, but if entropy happens and everything just, how do you maintain all of this?
It's a hugely interesting topic. And what I'm going to answer it is with a shout out to our public sector friends who are all trying to do more with less. But the folks who are electricians who could maintain the traffic signals and so forth, they now expected to be IP address and network guys. They're expected to configure routers. And if we're not done with making that all complicated, now we're expecting them to be radio technicians. And so to be able to understand radio propagations and antenna placements and signal strength and signal quality and leaf on and leaf off. The big issue of that radios work better down south here in Atlanta in the wintertime when the trees don't have leaves than in the summertime when they have leaves. And so the cities are resistant to the adoption of new technologies because it's too complicated. They're just struggling with their budgets and to keep the lights on and to keep everything maintained. That's an opportunity for the private sector. And what the private sector has to do is to step forward with service level agreements and service offerings. And again, through the distributors who have the ears of these local authorities. And we're moving somewhat into the space. We're a technology company, we're not a maintenance company. But to support the maintenance activity is going to require everybody on the private sector to put their best foot forward to deliver real value without it being threatening to the guys working in the local authority. Oh, we're just trying to take your job. No, we're not. We're trying to do more with less to deliver a more sophisticated infrastructure at lower cost, still with the folks that are there.
And what's really critical as well is to actually have systems in place that monitor all of this, because you can put everything out and wait for the public to call in, but you've got to be proactive with this kind of technology.
Yes, and that's where and that's why I described we're at a tipping point. 10 years ago, maintaining a connected vehicle system was in all likelihood probably very difficult. And the reason being is the entropy causes things to fail and lightning strikes and heaven knows what all. People stealing cables and ants building, we have all sorts of interesting things, ants building nests in the devices and the cabinets and so forth. And so what we have to do is maintain what we call the status and health of the system. You've got to know when something's failed, what's failed, and how to go and fix it. And so that's where we put a lot of effort in our world in what we call, what's an IoT approach, Internet of Things approach, to bring everything online and know the status and the health of everything. So we've got 23,000 devices in over 1,000 communities where we know the status and health of everyone and participate with our customers in keeping them maintained. And we've had one or two examples, as you know, where one group had a lot of solar-powered devices where the batteries were all defective and it weren't working properly and so forth. And we were quite insistent, we knew it was dangerous, that it be maintained and helped them with that. And now they're one of our best customers with everything with no alarms and fully maintained. So that's a key part of whatever systems you buy, is the outcome has to be that it's maintainable. And my suggestion would be, is that's the specified requirement. The system shall be maintainable for X dollars a year.
Well, we've got another question. Measures of effectiveness and the downside would you expect for transit-only system? I'm not sure if I fully understand the question. What are some of the measures of effectiveness for transit system?
I think I get the thing is if you have a transit priority system, do you mess up the rest of the traffic? And I'm going to interpret the question like that. Hopefully, I've got it right. So measures of effectiveness are a key part of how well is the traffic moving. Now, there's a couple of there are two interesting points. In years past, measures of effectiveness were based on the number of vehicles and and stops and delays for vehicles. We've sort of moved towards a paradigm where folks are focused on mobility. How does mobility, how many people can we move to where they need to move to? Then we've introduced the concept of social equity. And should we improve the lives of underserved communities by giving transit and so forth? And my answer to this question is that it varies. There are 10,000 cities, counties, and states who buy, operate, and maintain traffic equipment. It varies by each one of them because each one of those has got a political process that the traffic department is answerable to the political process about what does its citizenry want. And I'm going to illustrate with a couple of examples. Some of the systems that we've done only get transit priority when there are more than 5 people on the bus and the bus is behind schedule. That's a really light touch. Others are much more proactive, where they want to use a transit signal priority to affect social change. So they want to get fewer cars on the road, have a more walkable city, and have more people riding transit, in which case an empty bus gets priority. And if everybody on the side streets waits for an empty bus to go by, their theory is, well, maybe tomorrow they'll ride the bus.
I had that exact thing when I lived in the Netherlands. I saw, and every single time I went to the traffic light, that bus would get a green light, and I would be in my car, and I'd see that the bus would get to the city quicker than I would.
Correct.
And that changed my behavior.
So what do we see is our role is that the answer is that we're going to not be prescriptive with technology against policy. Policy is the prerogative of the local authority, and what they do is that they establish their policy outcomes, and then we implement it in the technology. We can download new plans, we can download new software, and that's a great example of solving a problem that we haven't thought of yet. So you don't have to worry too much about it. Make your transit signal priority a really high priority and see whether the public campaign. And if they do, back it off a bit. That might be an appropriate approach.
All right, we've only got about 2.5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you to try to answer this complex question, which is, where do you see the future of connected vehicles going?
We're at a tipping point. I see we've obviously made a major investment in connected vehicles. We've made a major investment in being radio agnostic and having pluggable radios so that we can survive the radio wars. We see the school bus driver and how we changed his life by using connected vehicles. We got, as I said, a great unsolicited email from Fire Chief in Baton Rouge, just I think the day before yesterday, just saying how great it was that he can get green lights and that everybody else is, he says he did an emergency shift because they were short-staffed, and he hasn't actually driven a fire vehicle for a long time, and he did 13 calls in a 13-hour shift, and he said it made his world fundamentally safer. All of these applications are they're enduring, they're real, they have value today, and that's where connected vehicle is going to go. It's going to move away from being a science experiment to companies like ours and our competitors and collaborators delivering these applications to make the world a better place, and that's just hugely exciting for all of us.
Well, Bryan, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of the expertise of a civil engineer in this electrical world.
Yeah.
For everybody else that joined us, thank you so much for joining us. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got lots of interesting things happening. Matthew, we will be at IMSA next week as well. So please come see us there, and there's some exciting things that we're going to be doing there. So thank you so much for joining us, and until next time.
Thanks very much, everybody.